Hi, Tanya. Thank you
Perfect.
so much for joining us here online. It's almost like dating online. Hi, Tanya. My name is Chamonix. What's your name?
Oh, I'm Tanya. There we go.
Thank you for the introduction. And tell us, Tanya,
Oh, no, okay.
how long have you been in Australia for?
So I've been in Australia for 17 years now. I came as a 12-year-old, so it's well and truly been a while.
Okay, so when you came as a 12-year-old, did you obviously
Yeah.
come with your parents and any other siblings?
Yeah, so my parents, a brother, and then my grandparents as well.
And are they all still in Australia?
Yes, except Grandpa's now currently visiting in South Africa and stuck there, so it's kind of
Oh, with
exciting.
COVID. Yeah, he's probably glad
Yeah.
that he's stuck there in a way because it gives him more reason to stay and have a bit more of a visit.
Yes. Yeah.
So Tanya, tell me, when your parents migrated back in the day,
Mhm.
how did they come across? Can you remember what visa category it was?
Yeah, so they came on a temporary business visa, or sorry, a short stay business visa.
Okay.
And so that involved us kids as well. Yeah.
And you said you were 12. So you went from primary school in South Africa to high school in Australia, or did you go to the same year?
Yeah, so that was actually an interesting one because as I think it's still the same in South Africa, grade 7 is primary school. So I was in the same primary school all along till the first term of year 7. And second term, we went down to Gansbaai, where my grandparents are. And then third term, I was in Australia, and because of our visa, I couldn't go to school, so we did homeschooling. And by the fourth term, I was in high school in Australia, no introduction to high school whatsoever. So that was a bit
Wow,
totally new changes. Yes,
that was a big year.
it was insane.
I can imagine so many changes. Wow, for a 12-year-old. And obviously you came out okay on the other end, but how was it at that
Yeah,
point in time when you moved across? How did you find the Australian schooling system?
it was interesting. I'll admit that. It was very, I was ahead. So South Africa definitely trains you up well. And by the time I started, of course, it's trying to get used to everything, get used to the language, I mean, the accent, more like it.
Mm.
And then the schooling system itself was more relaxed, I'll put it that way. So that was a huge adjustment, you know, from
Mm.
being very formal in South African school to.
So you were in a public school in South Africa and you went to a public school in Australia, is that right?
Yes, yeah. So both
And
times.
and would you say that the kids were very inviting of you when you started?
So that was another one in itself. It was obviously I was the new kid, and immediately they recognize your accent. So it's, oh my goodness, where are you from? Like, you sound so different. And so that kind of let me into a few more circles because they're like, oh, we've got the kid with a cool accent. And, you know, the questions that you get asked. So, yeah.
And what did you do after school? You finished matric, as we would say in South Africa. You finished year
Yeah.
12.
Yeah, so I finished at 12, applied for uni, ended up starting to work and sort of just taken it the easy way. So I worked all along and I'm actually starting uni now after 12 years next term. So
Exciting. So what are you going to
yeah,
study?
nursing and midwifery. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. And
Yeah.
where does this interest come from?
Oh, that's what I applied for when I finished school. And yeah, sort of took it back to that, and with COVID helping, sort of in the working realms, everything closed down, so it was looking at new avenues.
Yeah, good. And tell me,
Yeah.
Tanya, do you go back to South Africa often?
I've only been back once. So my grandparents that are still in South Africa, they come over quite regularly, so we get them over, all the families out except them. So it's sort of, we bring them over instead. So I've only been back once I sort of did it half my lifetime. tough. Like when I 12 years in South Africa, 12 years in Australia, I went back for 3 months, sort of just to see where I came from, my roots, sort of make up my mind whether I actually wanted to move back or stay in Australia.
I guess you've made up your mind.
Well and truly.
Or are you still in the process?
No, I'm well and truly glad to be in Australia.
Would you regard yourself as Australian or South African?
Australian. Like, I do appreciate my heritage, but it's sort of, I'm very thankful to be here.
And do you speak Afrikaans at all? Did you learn to speak Afrikaans when you were younger?
I speak Afrikaans properly.
Really?
Yeah.
So you were brought up Afrikaans?
Yes. Was brought up Afrikaans, and my parents knew that they wanted to leave the country, so they enrolled me in an English school in South Africa. After that, it was sort of which was great, but all along while being in Australia, we spoke in Afrikaans. I can't talk to my parents in English at all. It just feels totally wrong. I've got 2 little sisters that were born in Australia. Their first language was Afrikaans. So, yeah.
And do your siblings speak Afrikaans still?
Yes, all of us do. I can't, like, even when I call my brother and now and then we speak in Afrikaans, it just feels wrong to speak to him in English. Yeah.
Oh wow, how interesting is that? It's can you read and write Afrikaans?
Yes.
Wow, well done. Because you sound so Aussie, obviously. Because I mean, you sound, you've got the South African accent, but you sound a lot more Aussie than the typical South African accent, which is why, to my ear, I can't imagine you speaking Afrikaans. So I'll catch up with you afterwards and hear. Kan jy nog met my praat?
Definitely.
Oh, that's really lovely to hear. Tanya, what's the best thing for you about living in Australia?
I enjoy my freedom. So I've traveled a lot around Australia, and to me, it's being able to just go out any time of the day, any time of the night, and I don't have to look behind me. I think that's something that I've enjoyed a lot, just being able to be myself, and I love traveling, so that's sort of taking me right around. So yeah, that's to me the biggest part. Besides that, there's the multiculturalism in Australia.
And the worst thing for you about Australia?
That's a good one. That's a very good one. You kind of caught me off guard with that one. I can't think of anything. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, it's not the first time I have people I interview who tell me that there's nothing that they can think about, nothing that annoys them in Australia. I usually get the speed limit. People say, oh, they hate driving so slow in Australia. That's usually the big one. But yeah, quite often people say they just really can't think of anything that really annoys them. No. So what do you miss about South Africa, except for what people usually say family and friends, but you have your family here mostly.
Yes. Yeah.
And I don't assume that you're keeping in touch with a lot of your friends from primary school, do you?
Not from primary school, unfortunately. So that's obviously an age where you sort of go your own way. I do have one set of friends, actually, that I do sort of on the odd occasion, once a year we might pop in a hi. Whereas, mainly new friends I made when I went over to South Africa last time.
Okay, so apart from that, what do you miss from South Africa?
Sorry, there we go, the miss part. I would really have to say going to the Bosveld, so like Kruger National Park, and really just, there's something different in that sense. I think so far that's the only one.
Well,
food. Actually, the food. There's a few bits of food that is like, fed cook especially. Mum's not been able to do the recipe properly in Australia. So,
do you have many South African shops in Brisbane? I know you have some.
There are heaps. Yeah.
And some of them that make fed cook or not? Because we've got a really good We've got a couple here in Perth that make really nice vetkoek that you can go and have either in the in store like a restaurant,
Yeah.
or a takeout, and it's so yummy.
Okay, no, I've not seen any that offer vetkoek. I've heard that you can like go order like pizza dough and make your own vetkoek at home. And I was like, oh, I've got to try that one out. But no, none that make vetkoek.
Oh, you should tell them they should consider doing it.
Yeah, definitely.
It's been really interesting to hear from you. Thank you, Tanya. If there was a piece of advice that you could give South African families with children who were in that late primary, early high school ages, who were considering coming over to Australia, what would you say firstly to the students, or the child, I guess, or the teenager, because it's on that border age? And secondly, to the parents, what would you say to them if they said, oh, Tanya, should we or shouldn't we come to Australia?
Australians are very open. They include you in a lot of things, I've noticed. And so for the children, you're going to be ahead at school, so don't worry about that. And it's a new adventure, a new experience. Try it out. If you don't like it, I mean, there's always return flights home. To the parents, it's not so hard on the children. I know mum always got it of, how did your children survive? How did they cope? It was literally in the stride. You're at such a malleable age that anything goes. It's easy. It's at least they speak English here, so it's not as if they speak some different language with different characters instead of ABC. So there's a lot of similarities. So in that sense, it's not too far from home.
That's great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, because usually we hear from the parents.
Ah, yes.
And it's good to have a perspective from a child who's moved over, and you've been here well and truly for 15 or so years now. Yeah. 15 years, am I right?
17.
17.
No,
and
right.
It's interesting to hear how you've developed and changed or not changed in certain ways over the years.
Yeah.
But the most interesting to me is that you still speak Afrikaans, which is, yeah, it's lovely. Have you picked up a third language or not?
On the other occasion I've tried, so Spanish and French, but only very small amounts, yeah.
You don't need those here. You only need
exactly, that's the part.
I think for any South Africans who were to move to like a European country or one of those, it would be really beneficial, because you have the two languages already, so your brain knows how to just learn a third language or a fourth language. Whereas we've seen with the Australians who can only speak one language, that they really find it hard to learn a second language, because it's a very different way of thinking.
Yes.
To speak in another language. So once you have the ability to do it in two languages, you train your brain to switch between this skills word set and that word set. Whereas if you only know how to do one, then it's really hard to do the switching. So yes, thank you for taking the time to chat to us. It's been really great, and I'm sure that there will be some parents that will be like heart warmed tonight, thinking, oh, thank goodness. If I have early teenagers coming to Australia, there are some other South Africans who've gone across and really settled in well. And I agree with you. Most of the times it's the parents who just think, oh, well, how are my children going to adapt? And the children have adapted a long time before the parents are still thinking, oh, but what about my children? In the meantime, they need to adapt. They should if they just settle in, then everything will be okay. The kids will be fine.
The kids can do it. They definitely can.
They're very resilient.
Yes.
Thank you, Tanya. You should have a lovely evening, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.